Open Grand Finals at Dreamhack Winter. I am Nathanius. Bringing you this next series with me is In Control.
Yes, should be a good one. I believe it is Life versus MMA.
Two pretty good players. They've had pretty good results so far in their groups today. Life hasn't dropped a series yet. MMA has only dropped one, so both of them looking pretty good to get out of their groups and make it into the bracket stage tomorrow. Both players have actually put up great games. You've seen them both on stream as well.
Well, MMA is coming off of a European Championship in WCS where he performed extremely well. And, of course, Life running red hot at IEM New York. But even before that, Life was one of those players that people are looking to be that, whoa, that guy's going to carry the Zerg torch. He actually has the weight of the entire Zerg race on his shoulders. Both championship caliber players playing here at the Champion of Championships, that is Dreamhack Winter Open 2013.
And
really
here
excited.
We see Life getting ready. He's getting ready to putting on his headphones, of course. He played some great ZVT earlier against Polt. And I have to say, even casting that match, I'm really interested to see how MMA is going to try to do something a little bit different than what we saw Polt pull off, because in the straight-up macro game, Life completely manhandled Polt. It was a pretty rough series for the Terran player, and MMA kind of plays a similar style. He likes to get map control. He might play a little bit more economically at the start. I wouldn't be surprised to see him play Command Center first style. We are opening up on Belshir Vestige, so I'm going to want to get any thoughts on how MMA might be able to change things up versus the way that Polt tried?
Well, I feel like you have to play Life a little bit different than you play other Zergs. I heard you guys talking about during the broadcast, but he's known for his Zergling counter, for his he does things with Zerglings that other people just scratch their head at and say, I don't even know how that's possible. But you have to know that's coming. That means you have to be very diligent about your SimCity in terms of depot walls, securing bunkers, and just making sure that you're always looking for those 20-some-odd speedlings to poke and prod at places you didn't think possible. And as long as you shut those down, and you shut him hard, Life is mortal. He is a human man, a young man at that, so it is possible to beat him.
Well, that will be contested now as we are here on Belshir Vestige, spawning in the bottom right position as the red Zerg player. He's dominating his group from Team Startail. It is Life. He's just been on a complete tear, but his opponent in the top left as the blue Terran from Team Acer, it is MMA. And I think something important here to note is that if MMA can take this series, he's got a very good map score in this group despite having lost the match to JYP. There is a potential for him to grab that second place spot, which means he gets that extra life in the bracket stage. He can go on to the winner's bracket and be a little bit more comfortable moving into tomorrow's matches.
Well, it's a big deal, too, because you can hit some absolute roadblocks in a tournament like this where, you take third place, fantastic, but guess what? Innovation also took third place in his group, or fourth place, or what have you, and all of a sudden you're one best of 5 or 3, I'm not sure if it's at that stage best of 5 or 3, away from being completely eliminated despite a very good performance on day number 1. So that extra life is a big freaking deal. You want to start off in that winner bracket, give yourself a chance to have a mulligan, to say, oh crap, I ran into someone that's running red hot or is just some kind of god tier player, and make a run in that lower bracket.
Yeah, StarCraft can be pretty unforgiving. Having an extra life is it's a big deal. And I mean, looking at this game so far, pretty standard openers from both players. Hatchery first, and then they choosing to open up with the Reaper. I think that's a pretty smart decision on Belshir Vestige. It's a smaller map. The Reaper can get around a little bit more quickly. And also, Life not a stranger to throwing out the occasional early pool against the Terran player. Definitely smart. Just play safe versus him because he's got the gas going before his spawning pool. This is what he's done in every ZVT that we've seen him play today, and this is just typical Life.
You bring up a really good point. It's something that is typical of Life is on these, not necessarily the maps like a Belshir Vestige or something like that, but he'll do on like a Whirlwind an early 9 pool or even earlier than that and go for that low ground CC quick win. So running Reaper against him is not a bad choice because, of course, it's not the most economical choice. It's not as good as like CC first, but it's the most okay against just about every build, and then it's a straight-up win against early pool. We can see here that that's not going to be the case. MMA is going to feel out this game and see that it is a very safe, as you said, hatch first, but then also a pretty quick gas follow-up. So these Reapers are going to have their moment in the sun where they can harass the natural, maybe get a drone or two, or just perhaps, force some disarray there. But then they're going to have to get out and be very careful because speedlings can run them down pretty quick.
Yeah, Life's Overlord gets this scout on the natural expansion as well, so he knows everything that's going on as this Reaper arrives. One drone kind of hiding in the natural, seeing if he can get any damage in. He sees the gas. He should be able to see the spawning pool shimmering that the Speed is researching, but he hasn't scouted it just yet. It's a pretty standard thing for Life to do, though. The Reaper's just going to jump around, and with pretty decent control, he can keep the Reaper from killing anything. And once the Queens are out, there's not too much more damage that you can do with the Reaper.
And he's just buying time right now. He's just trying to not lose anything. And if you watch this, it's a thing of beauty. So far, Life has lost just that one Zergling, and he probably flinched when that happened because in Life's world, he actually doesn't lose things like that. He doesn't really make mistakes like the rest of us StarCraft 2 players. The two Reapers are going to back away. One is down in the deep red, but it should heal just fine. Meanwhile, back at home, we see, again, as Nathaniel's pointed out very early on, a completely standard opening. We see the factory to follow up. It'll swap with that reactor, and he will start churning out probably as many as 6 Hellions. Very rarely is it fewer or more. Although I do flash back to that series that you and Apollo casted where we saw it was like 10 or 12 Hellions on this very map in conjunction with those Reapers doing a lot of damage to the third.
Yeah, but especially that game versus Polt, he really tried to bring a lot of extra pressure, and that was one of his ways of dealing with the Zergling-heavy style of Life. But look at this. MMA tucks the starport behind his mineral line. Obviously doesn't want it to be seen, but he had enough minerals to just get a fast third command center if he wanted to. So we're already kind of seeing him respect the way that Life plays.
Yeah.
You don't want to play too greedily, even if he's someone that's known mostly for getting the early gas for speedlings. One of the biggest threats of seeing the Zerg with that gas is they could always just go right back onto that and try to bring some next level pressure towards you, especially considering that MMA doesn't even have a bunker or any Marines to put in one.
That's kind of what makes Life such a dangerous player, is that he gets so much credit, deservedly so, for his lane control and his ability to harass it just throughout the entire game, early, mid, and late. He does it all game long, and he does it with results. But to your point, what's to stop Life from throwing down a quick Roach Warren or a fast Baneling Nest? If you're not on top of your scouting game against a player like Life, he will punish you. And he has this weird, super young, like, he's just some kind of savant of the game. He'll do these things that click with what you're doing. So you got to be playing your A game, otherwise he'll punish you for any little mistake you make.
Yeah, and now he knows about the starport at the very least. This Viking going to town's got one Overlord kill so far, the scouting Overlord, and now just continuing to press forward. So the Hellion count for MMA has reached that 6 count, so he's going to move the factory away. The second barracks is about to complete. He can go into some pretty quick Marine production. We even have a medevac following this up. So MMA's keeping the options for pressure open. He could do a very quick drop with the Marines that he makes, or with this mine coming in, he could bring them in with the Hellions. There's a lot of potential here. He's trying to press the creep back, but Life denied just a little bit so far.
I like what you pointed out with the Viking. If you look at the Terran half the map, there's not a frickin' Overlord over there, man. There's zero vision. These Hellions and Reapers are going to do a little bit of poking and prodding, but the 3-queen wall is kind of the standard. Hey, I've invested in what it takes to stop you from doing anything over here. And look at Life once again. Peels off a group of his Zerglings. He's making his way up there. Needs to be careful. He is going to lose one Hellion there. He's going to go ahead and return fire against the rest. Third base established for Life, though, and with these 1-1 Zergling upgrades coming in, at melee and carapace, he's sitting pretty. We have seen him do the Spire as per usual, and he's kind of he's formulaic about it. We shouldn't see too many like Roach variations or Roach Hydra, for God's sakes. It should just be Mutiling Balin all day and night.
And I mean, there's a potential here for Life to just try to make something happen with his +1/1. He's been producing constantly Zerglings for the last 2 minutes, just a huge amount. And the Hellions are bringing the pressure on the front, but he's ran them around the right side, trying to stay outside the vision. 12 Banelings are on the way. Life is going to try to do some serious damage even before his 1-1 is done. He kind of senses this vulnerability of opening with the starport. One of the weaknesses is that your production is just generally slower. There's only 2 barracks on the map for MMA. He's just now starting 3 more. Is this going to kill him? His wall's not even raised. The bunker gets surrounded. Life is moving in. The SCV's being pulled, trying to get this back together, but 12 Banelings is way too much for this army to handle. Suddenly, everything being pulled back. The medevac is on the other side of the map, and these Banelings sitting on top of all the SCVs and the natural. He's losing everything.
Yeah, the reactor goes down in the barracks as well, and it looks like he's going to come back home and try to defend, but right now he's got piecemeal everything. There is a nice little counterattack. It could actually hit that evolution chamber just before the upgrade finishes. Instead, they don't. They go forward, and they're going to pay for that crime in blood. The counterattack is being held off on Life's side of things. And meanwhile, inside the Terran base, it's all chaos. I mean, there's hardly any SCVs working at that natural. There's 3 Hellions going around trying to clear up the Zergling menace, but more are on the way.
I mean, those Hellions actually got a fantastic position tucked by the command center in the natural, and even killing 30 Zerglings between all three of them, still not enough to stave this off. There's 3 medevacs here. There's 3 medevacs, there's 2 Marines. There's nothing to heal. He has Stim, he has the engineering bays now, but there's no bio to push this through. He's supply block. He can't even produce Marines trying to wall this ramp off. More Banelings are being made. MMA does not have an answer to this. The most he could do is maybe drop a Hellion on the low ground and try to just kite him away, but that's not going to work. Here he comes into the wall. All the supply depots are blocked. Cannot produce any more units, and these Zerglings are just going to tear through what's left of MMA's
There's
economy.
too much. I mean, he actually just did a supply call down, so that was an expensive depot that died. Life has ransacked the main. He's just now completing his lair, and behind this, some drones are being squeaked out, but guess what? There's too many Lings to deal with. I mean, some hero Hellion in the middle of that mineral line is going ham. But not being repaired does mean it will eventually die here. And MMA is going to hold on because he's a freaking hero, but that's about it. Yeah, there we go. GG, and Life takes game number 1.
Yeah, he scanned the match, just wanted to see everything that was going on. It's like, okay, that was a fully committed assault. And that's something you have to be worried about from Life. Just because he opens up with the speedling play doesn't mean he's always going to play so economically like we saw against Pol. And he found a great way to abuse a Terran player that opened up Hellions. Oftentimes you worry, okay, if your Hellions get caught, then the Baneling attack comes. But he said, okay, even though the Vikings are going to clear out the Overlords, I can still sneak around the right side because it's not like the Terran player has Overlords on the map to see that Zergling force coming. And MMA, he was caught off guard by it.
Well, what I like about this is that it's a metagame crushing strategy that's going to give MMA pause for the rest of the series. He didn't go fast 3rd CC. It wasn't the most greedy opening. We've seen 3rd CC double eBay, and a lot of times even things like cloaked banshees if you're Tasia. It is possible to be that greedy, and then this kind of attack's like an auto win. But for the rest of the series, MMA has to say, well, gosh, there could just be speed Baneling out there. I don't know that I want to take the risk of being out on the map with my Hellions and my Reapers. But then if you're not out on the map with those, then the creep gets out of control and you're in a lot of trouble. So it puts MMA in a tough spot.
Yeah, and that's just one of the problems, especially a feature of Belshir Vest, is the 3 ways that you can move out of your base. Just make it so he was trying to stop the creep on the left side, as you said, bringing the pressure to that 3rd base, which is very standard. And we saw him pick off a couple of creep tumors, but just that little bit of focus that he had trying to delay the creep allowed those Zerglings to escape on the right side. And if you're 6 Hellions with 2 Reapers can hold that attack off if you see it coming in time, but did not see how low the drones were on the 3rd base until it was too late.
And Life is having a tougher time with that headset than he did with MMA game number 1. And he's the kind of player that can say something like that. Waiting for the scream formation for his face from that too. Have you seen those pictures?
Yeah.
Takes both sides of his face and just slams it forward as far as his Labrador skin will allow. It's adorable. But Life sitting absolutely pretty. He's been monster moding. MMA. I again kind of think back to WCS EU where MMA faced some really fantastic Zerg players and made them look like absolute jobbers. His TVZ is actually sick. Of course, we're not going to judge MMA just on this first game, but again, the way Life's playing right now, he's looking like one of those guys that could come away your DreamHack winter champion.
Yeah, he's just playing so damn well. That's really the only way to put it. And you can kind of see now why he has this 3-0 match score in his group. We're going to get into the lobby for this game in just a few moments' time, but the map is Akalon Wastes. I feel like this is a map where it's a little bit easier to see those Zerglings coming out. There's really only one way to leave your base as a Zerg player with the production. So if MMA plays the same style, he could pretty easily keep I think a little bit better eye on what Life puts out. So that type of attack, maybe not going to work, but that's just the thing. Life doesn't really need to bring that kind of attack to take games against Terran.
Well, I mean, there's a couple things to talk about. You talk about, like, leaving, and that's certainly a big factor, but there's also, on the other side of things, where do those Zerglings then go? As long as MMA is on top of it, it's either that big ramp or it's that potential rock 3rd base, which, again, is very easily SimCity locked in. So there is a potential for MMA to say, hey, one of your strongest abilities is your lane counterattack and kind of your aggression overall. I'm going to narrow that scope, and I'm going to reduce what you can do with that. To your point, though, and what we saw again in that Pult series, his Life is not a one-trick pony, man. He had some freaking good Mutalisks, in that series as well, doing some serious damage. And Akalon Waste, for all its blessings it gives the Terran versus Zerg on the Terran side of the matchup, bouncing between the 3rd and the main and the natural, very, very tough on the Terran players when Mutas are able to do that with a giant chunk of Mutas.
Yeah, Akalon Waste is a great defensive map, as you said, but we're counting down into the game number 2 of this best of 3. And here we are.
Here we are,
Akalon Wastes is the setting. and spawning in the top left position as the red Zerg player currently up 1-0, making it look easy from Team Startail. It is Life. And that unpredictability, just such a big deal. His opponent in the bottom right, the blue Terran from Team Acer, it is MMA.
I also want to go back and say that I like the choice of strategy from Life for Belcher Vestige in terms of map play as well, because that is a map that once that parade push gets going, we've seen so many games end with a Terran victory. And it's not, I don't know that people would go as far as to say Belcher Vestige is like an imbalanced, super Terran favored map. I really don't think that's true. But what I would say is that I think it's stronger for the TVZ matchup, especially in the mid game when that 3-3 hits and Zerg is still on lair. And that fourth base is so hard for the Zerg to keep, and Terran's just kind of shoving units down their throat. We've seen it end time and time again in favor of Terran, but Life said, you know what, I don't want to get to that point. I'd like to take a big advantage or win the game. Opted for the strategy that was able to do that and pulls out the early win.
Yeah, I think another way that kind of plays into the Akalon Wastes map is that the longer rush distance, of course, making those sort of pushes, you're either going towards, you're pretty much always going towards that rock base or the third base that's on the outside. It's a lot more difficult to press the fourth on this map than others, and with good creep spread, it's a lot easier for the Zerg player to bring in the reinforcements. This game, we're seeing MMA open up with the Reaper play once again. Life's got the hatchery on the way. No gas just yet, but I feel like the Reaper play, we kind of said, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing the same type of strategy, since you really just want to keep that container, try to lock down those Zerglings as much as you can in the early game.
Well, I like it because it's almost kind of a double bluff. Like, this would be a map where CC on the low ground is a big risk, but certainly something we've seen much more commonly than on other maps.
Yeah.
And again, Life could just auto-win in that situation. So I don't necessarily know that that's super at what's at the forefront of both these guys' minds, because MMA, he is a CC kind of player, but he'll do it on the big maps like a Whirlwind. And even then, there's not much motivating the Terran to do it on the low ground. Like, it's become standard to do it as part of the wall-in, and then the barracks is the other half of that wall-in. And if there is some kind of early pool, we've seen it proven you can just kind of eBay block behind that, get out a Marine, and win the freaking game.
Yeah, there's so many ways to deal with that type of aggression, and honestly, with the position that Life's in this group, he really doesn't need to do anything crazy special. But I do like how in the series against Polt, we didn't really see any of that sub 10-minute aggression. He snuck a few Zerglings in when he played him on Derelict Watcher, but it makes it difficult for MMA to read his opponent, because if he watches those games, he says, okay, well, he'll open up with speed and play macro, but now he has to keep his eyes open. Well, he opened up speed and then went into a huge quasi 3-base all-in with that Speedling Baneling attack. So the Reaper will come in, and he's going to see exactly what Polt saw every game. He saw exactly what he saw in the last game, that fast gas being used for the speed. The drones get pulled off. In Life, he's just playing his game. And this Reaper, not even killing a Zergling just yet. The Queens are about to come out. Maybe he'll get the same trade as last time, but doesn't even look that close.
Not even. One more Zergling for Life. So this game's already going just so much better.
I mean, if you're one of Life's Zergs, that's basically like having double the army supply.
I think that's about 10 SCVs is how that translates. But one drone does die here. Nice little annoying tactics from MMA. But to your point, which I really like, MMA Scouts sees the gas, sees it not being mined, which he presumes at this time of the game means that there is probably 100 gas into that spawning pool, and predictably for speed. But now he's got to respect the ever-living crap out of that. I mean, one game before it was Speedlings that are, again, a nice response to the Hellion and the Reaper opening, but it ended up being a nice response to just 1-0 win, you know, and basically MMA's got to be very mindful of that fact repeating.
And another thing, a couple of these Zerglings actually managed to slip past the Reapers, already slowing down the production of this wall. The command center's complete, so he doesn't have that to worry about, but speed is done as well, which means just the Reapers coming back isn't going to work quite as easily. The Hellions will be out in a little bit, sure, but one very important thing to consider on this map in particular, as more Zerglings do chase in, is this is a pretty big ramp to wall off. So he getting in and slowing this down in the early phase is very important. Barely manages to save that Reaper with 5 hit points, one shot away from death.
Nice little micro battle. MMA is able to kill something like 8 Zerglings there. Did lose the 1 Reaper, but I gotta say, the Reaper becomes like a nice supplement to the 6 harassing Hellions, but not a super big deal. You're not really counting on that Reaper to do much more. Again, Life, though, he trades Zerglings for a living. That's literally what this guy does all day long, probably for about 12 hours, sitting inside some kind of Startail facility. Third hatch does go down behind this. And he has 2 spreading queens. Actually, is it 3? No, that third one should be at the natural. In fact, he's even making another one inside the main, so a lot of queens coming out actually here for life.
Yeah, he's actually been opening up with a lot of queens overall in today's game. So he had something like 7 on Polar Knight just because it's difficult to get the creep to that third base. But the evolution chambers are coming in. MMA is kind of sticking to the same sort of opener that we saw on the last map. This fast Viking. He has the quick second barracks as well. But I'm wondering if that low amount of production is going to end up being something that hurts him, like he did in the last game. It's one of the classic weaknesses of this fast starport play, because you still want to get to engineering base before you move into your total production. Otherwise, as we can see with these evolution chambers finishing, you can fall behind very quickly in the upgrades.
I like it. You know, the Viking can do so much, but actually Life just kind of naturally responds this really nicely. He's going to kill 1 Overlord on the Terran half the map. Now, is a Viking at this time worth the 1 Overlord? Probably not, Nathanius, but against most Zergs, it's at least 2 Overlords, sometimes 3. So Life, again, he's just kind of some kind of weird time, you know, he just reads into the future and is like, I should not have as many, and then he doesn't, and it works out. 3 queens, going to make these Hellions in the middle of the map rather useless as well. Life is just 1 step ahead.
Yeah, it's just a really interesting metagame because there are so few Terrans that have actually been doing that opening with the Viking later. I think mostly I've seen it from MMA and Pult, and the way that the Zerg players seem to respond is later on, everybody gets the Overlord speed so that you can see with the Overseers and track down the mines. Once the Mutalisks come out and that Viking isn't really a problem, there's some Zerg players that respread after, and they only send 2 Overlords in the beginning because they kind of anticipate this happening rather than spreading out with all of the original Overlords. These Hellions are going to be able to shut down the creep tumors a little bit on the south side. The engineering bays are just about to finish, though, as 1-1 is over halfway complete for Life. So he's sitting pretty. His lair is going to be completed soon. His Baneling nest will line up pretty well. He can start the Baneling speed upgrade, but 6 Marine drop inside of the natural expansion. What can MMA do with this?
Pulls back the Queen just in the nick of time, does as much damage as he can to that lone medevac, making it a precarious endeavor indeed. Like, it's going to hang out around here, but actually it's probably going to get shot down.
It's very, very low. Coming in back to the main.
Oh, that poor Queen.
That's out 1 Marine to distract him.
Come back, Senny.
And he actually gets most of these out of here, which is a little bit impressive. His Hellions weren't able to do too much of the spreading creep during this time, though. But MMA's third command center is completing now. His engineering bays are going. He's about 1/4 of the way on his +1/1 upgrades. These Hellions and the Reaper are still dancing around, but he hasn't actually invested anything in any scans to clean up this creep. And now that the Zergling count is going to really start to flourish, it's going to become harder and harder to stop the spread of that creep. And we can see MMA already busting down the rocks. I think taking the outer third base versus Life is just more difficult because it's easier to run by with that Zerglings.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. He's got the Marines already working on the rocks, as you pointed out, which I think is... I feel like MMA agrees with you. Like it's just not an option as a third to take that outside base. A couple of Zerglings do come in here and say those rocks are being worked on. In fact, I think he might have even spotted the floating CC itself. Not that that's a huge shocker. What would be shocking is if there wasn't this third CC and there was instead like 3 more barracks or some kind of weird all-in. But MMA is not going to play to that. The strength of TVZ in general for these Terran players, I feel, is that mid-game. And we're talking about there should have been a little bit more of an 11-minute push, but it didn't end up happening. So we're kind of seeing a delayed push coming out from MMA, but that means that there's going to be more Widow Mines in the initial aggression. And that's in the wheelhouse of Terran. I feel like it's going to, from there to 3-3 is when Terran should do most of their damage.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that oftentimes Terran players, it's one of those attacks you want to hit when you get your first couple of medevacs out. Just bring the Marines with stim. If you've kept your Hellions alive, good on you. Try to shove the creep back as much as possible. But he's been playing a much more patient game. Now he's starting to press out, but the Mutalisks are going to be on the field. There's no missile turrets up yet, which does present a slight vulnerability to a counterattack. Thankfully for him, he's actually supply depot walling behind the rocks already in anticipation of an attack from there.
Well, he's just picked off a medevac.
Yeah, it's one of the things he's actually done a really good job of is focusing the medevacs down with those queens. Now he's starting to clean up the creep. Keeping these Hellions alive is so nice since it's mostly Zerglings, very few Banelings in this composition for Life. And now he's just going to give chase. The Widow Mines not getting the greatest shots. He does get some nice tanking with the Marauders up front, but those Banelings will give chase and they will find those Marines. This attack pretty much completely shut down. He escapes with a medevac and a few Marines. The reinforcements will grab a Mutalisk. Nice catch there from MMA, but his 2-2 is starting as 2-2 is about to complete for the Startail Zerg player.
The upgraded disadvantage will be tough to overcome, but this is when MMA has to get his work done. I mean, I felt like Life defended that about as well as he could. He was fighting on creep. The Banelings, yes, they did hit the Hellions initially, but then they passed those Marauders and connected with the Marines. But even so, MMA is reloading with a gigantic force. He's actually trailing in supply, but he's got enough Widow Mines, enough Medevacs, enough Marines to do anything he wants with this. Well, that's weird to say. Not anything he wants, but he's got enough to do some damage. Triple Barracks going down behind this, and a fourth being checked to see if a CC can land there nicely. I like the second factory, by the way, from MMA. Very quick, and I like that he got Tunneling Claws as quick as he did. Some Terrans kind of neglect that, and I feel like it costs them, but MMA in a nice position here.
Yeah, it's honestly an interesting evaluation of a Terran, where you want to spend your gas in the early game. MMA gets this very quick fifth gas at his third base that allows him to really afford that factory just a little bit sooner, and that's enough for him to get the Drilling Claws upgrade, which is honestly super important considering that Widow Mines have already taken a little bit of a change negatively towards their damage output. But now they're being strewn across the map randomly, grabbing a few random kills here. It's not that. He's trying to press the creep from multiple fronts, but as these mines detonate, it becomes more and more difficult. Life is just amping up the Zergling count. Infestation Pit is about to complete, so he's going to be able to move to Hive. And he has this upgrade advantage. This army gets completely swabbed on the top. More Widow Mines are coming up, but he needs to be very careful about how he takes these fights, because Life doesn't need to just win with Banelings. He can just have so many links, it doesn't even matter what units you have.
Yeah, it was an interesting situation. Like, MMA had his army split into thirds, and it's dangerous, I feel like, if the Zerg flies some Mutalisk in the wrong spot or gets flustered and loses control and some Banelings pop unnecessarily. That's all things that could potentially happen, but Life, his units are kind of like little extensions of his own mind. They don't seem to make those kind of mistakes. So MMA applied some interesting mechanical pressure on his opponent, and it did not pay off. Life is now securing a fourth base, a fifth base, which is that luxury base. That's the base where it's like, okay, well, I guess I get Hive right now. I'm going to afford Ultras real soon. Everything's fine. I'll make 40 Banelings. It's going to get really scary for MMA, because that mid game that I talked about, Nathanius, we're getting past it. 3-3 has initiated for the Terran player, but he has done 0 econ damage. No drops successfully doing anything. The Hellions kind of fought back creep, but that's about it. It's looking ugly all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's getting into a really tense spot. The 3-3 starts for MMA sooner than Life. He does have a medevac moving towards the left side of the map. He's brought the Viking out once again, and it's kind of funny because Life did re-spread out those Overlords, at least towards the top side of the map, to watch for those drops. But the positioning of MMA's army is constantly towards the northeast side. And it's good in TVZ to try to stop the creep spread, but unless you're planting your fourth base where your army is in this situation, he's trading his army for creep at this point. The fourth base, mostly unharassed, the medevac drop really not finding anywhere to do damage. The Ultralisk Cavern's coming in, the 3-3. Now the drop's going to hit the fourth. There's a couple of Zerglings already prepared. Most of the army is actually towards the center of the map, so there's potential here for to actually chew away at some of these Zerglings and take out the creep at the same time. Really
nice Widow Mine shot, and the cool thing about that too is even if these Marines get cleaned up, unless an Overseer sent over here, that Widow Mine will continue to be annoying. A little bit of a skirmish in the middle of the map. Our Zerg player has started that Hive Tech stuff, as you talked about, Nathanius. There's that Ultralisk Cavern, but also Adrenal upgrades, 3-3, like really, really big stuff. And again, MMA's just kind of waffling back and forth. The creep's scaring him. I mean, look at this. It's getting close to his own third base. He will kill that active tumor, but I feel like, I don't know, MMA's intimidated. I want to just kind of come out and say it. I feel like he looks at Life and says, I don't feel confident in any kind of move out. And Life's playing super, super strong here to make that intimidation a reality.
So here's another interesting thing about the way that MMA set up his production. He's on 3 factories, but he's only produced 1 Thor. All of his barracks have reactors, save 1. The Marauder production is very limited. Once these Ultralisks come out, the Marines, they almost become useless. It's like they're spraying BB guns at them.
Yeah.
And with just the Zerglings and the Banelings coming in with those, he can just get in fantastic trades. All he needs to do is stay on creep and force MMA to fight on the creep. And when it's pretty much outside of MMA's third base, pressing across the map just becomes so much more difficult.
5 Ultralisks, 19 Banelings in production. MMA is going to surge forward. He just got grazed by the Zerg army and looked at it and said, wow, I have a much bigger army. Well, that's because a lot of the supply is tied up in those baby Ultralisks that are about to be birthed into this world. And there's a few Marauders out here. There's a single Thor, and I actually might be speaking too soon. They're about to get Baneling.
He steps
but other than that,
far
there's
out
nothing.
The creep. There's no way to retreat. Exactly. His whole army will get cleaned up. The medevacs as well. What few mines remain. There's another Thor in production. 15 Marines at a time. He doesn't need Marines right now. I mean, aside from the fact that there's still Mutalisks, this is just where it gets more and more difficult. The Thors with the Marines, you take the trades like that on creep, just makes it so much harder. He's down 50 supply now. The Ultralisk count, there's 2 more in the per attack.
And
he has
infestors.
6 out on the map. And infestors, 7 of them on the way. His 3-3 is about to complete. His chitin is plating, 75% done. A nice attack on these Mutalisks. The best part about keeping the Mutas alive is even if he switched into full Marauder production, he still has to deal with these Mutalisks. And there's about 14 of them on the map. If he goes into cuts his Marine production in half to get out Marauders, it's going to become a whole different ballgame.
You know, MMA has done a great job of scaling his production up, as you pointed out, up to 3 factories. There's the additional barracks as well. He's taken a 4th base around 20 minutes. All of that's great, but I feel like Life is on another level in terms of army control and basically in management. MMA has not maxed out. This is about as close as he's gotten at 180 supply, but all the times that he's gotten close, it was just to then lose his entire army. Here we go again. And his army is infantile in comparison. He has no answer to the Infestors. He has no answer to the Ultras. He's got 1 Marauder in production versus the 10 Marines he's producing, so he's just not equipped to even make the transition. We've got Broodlords at least being conceived behind this with that Greater Spire finishing up and probably, presumably, very soon, Corruptors to come out as well. I mean, Life has been just manhandling him in terms of army control.
This has been a fantastic series from Life. He's controlled this game, the pace of it, from the very beginning, from denying the first pressure on the creep and just keeping MMA away from him.
Yeah.
The only units MMA can make, now 3 Marauders are coming at a time, but when your opponent has 7, 8 Ultralisks outside of your base, it's a little bit too late, and now he's going to step up, trying to just bait out the Widowmine shots, using the
He can't
infested
attack here,
Terrans
though.
as well.
He cannot go up there. He has to make sure not to make that fatal and critical mistake where he's like, oh, I just got to win now because I've been winning all game long.
I think you deny the 4th, he doesn't need to press up that ramp.
Exactly right.
The biggest threat is the Marines on the high ground, obviously,
Yes.
but just taking that bad position. But he comes and he tries to drop these Marines to bait out the Banelings. The 4th base is gone. MMA's mined out of his main. The Natural's running dry as well. He's trying to hit a drop on the left side, going for the full surround on this force.
Whoa.
The Transfuse is coming in from the Queens. The Ultras just gobble these up like
MMA
Thanksgiving
cannot come
dinner.
down either, though.
And he
That's-
is barreling in. He's got the Overseers as well to spot everything. Life is crashing through. He's up 190 supply to 100, and MMA's floating the command center out, but Corruptors are on the way. The Marine production, it's just not enough. He does not have what he needs to stop this. GG Life with a 2-0 sweep in this best of 3.
And I'm telling you, man, he had a tougher time with his headset than he did with this series. He made this look easy. He sucked the confidence out of MMA's play in that game number 2. Like MMA, he was hitting his production cycles. He was not getting too supply blocked too often like you sometimes will see MMA do. His upgrades were a little bit later, I guess, but really those aren't even the flaws that I'm looking at. It's just that every time he moved out, every time he tried to drop, it was getting absolutely squelched by a sea of Zerglings with perfect Baneley control behind it. And then those Mutalisks, they just had mid-map control. There was never a critical, I mean, you pointed this out, he was up to 3 factories, but he never had the, 20 Widowmines you sometimes see. It was always, 5, and 3 of them are meaninglessly out in, no man's land.
Yeah, I think a very important thing to take into consideration when you're looking at a Terran versus Zerg like that is if you want to stay that Marine heavy to keep the threat of Mutalisks away, those factories have to pump out Thors. They're the only other unit you're going to make on the ground that can go toe-to-toe with the Ultralisks. And we've seen some players like Tasia and Maru actually get up to about 7 Thors mixed in with their army to try to fight, but in a situation like that, you can't win with 60 Marines and 1 Thor, even if you're maxed out on Marines, versus that many Ultralisks with the Fungals, with the Banelings, and with the Infestor support. Life just played it perfectly, to be honest.
And I believe that completes his group. Did he go 8-1 in maps or something like that, or 8-0?
Pretty much.
I know he 2-0 JYP. He's in absolute dominant form, and I know it sounds like I'm the author of his fan page or something like that, but I just got to be honest with you. When I see Life play, I get strong Brood War-esque vibes. He's very micro-oriented, very fast, really fun player to watch, and I'm really excited to see who he matches up with later in the tournament.
All right, well, that is the victory for Life, and now we have our winner's interview with him. See how he feels about that match. Take it away.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Congratulations, Life. You showed amazing games today, and it seems like his ZVT is really on top form, as earlier we saw that he defeated Polt, and here we saw he defeated MMA. So I actually kind of want to see how he feels about that matchup in general, if he's just particularly confident in it, or if he thinks he's just confident in all matchups in general. 이제 아까 전에는 최승원 선수를 이겼고 이번에는 문성원 선수 이겼잖아요. 그래서 이제 테란전 대해서 어떻게 생각하세요? 되게 자신 있으세요? 아니면 그냥 모든 전에 자신 있으세요?
사실 모든 전 다 자신 있는데 테란전이 조금 더 자신 있어요.
So he says, actually, I'm confident in all my matchups, but I would say that I am a little more confident in my Terran matchup. And I actually want to talk to him about the players that are left in this pool. I mean, obviously, he's out of the group stage now. He's first in his group, which is amazing in and of itself, as he didn't have quite an easy group. I want to see if there's any players that he particularly wants to play or avoid. 이제 남은 이제 조에서 1등으로 나온 거는 축하드리고요. 남은 대회에 특별히 뭐 만나고 싶은 선수 있으세요? 아니면 좀 피하고 싶은 선수 있으세요?
만나고 싶은 선수도 없고 피하고 싶은 선수도 없어서 무조건 이길 것 같아 다.
He says, there's not a player I want to avoid or meet. I really don't care. I think I'll just win no matter what. There's your confidence from life. But I do want to see how he feels about potentially meeting Tasia, because Tasia was actually the one that knocked his Dreamhack Bucharest run short. So I want to see if he is interested in getting revenge at all for that. 지난 부카레스트 대회에서는 그 윤영서 때문에 졌잖아요. 그래서 혹시 그 윤영서 선수에 대한 뭐 복수하고 싶은 마음은 없는지?
그땐 제가 자신도 없었고 그냥 제가 엄청 못한다고 생각했어서 질 거라고 생각했고요. 이번에 만나면 아무나 이길 수 있을 것 같아요.
So he says, actually, back then I had no confidence. I didn't feel like I was playing well at all. So I actually went into that game thinking I was going to lose. But here I've regained all my confidence, and I honestly do feel that anyone I play will just lose to me. I'm that confident right now. So it seems life is on tip-top form at this tournament. I actually want to see what this tournament Dreamhack Winter means to him, as it would kind of seal a kind of rough year for him and compared to his 2012 year. So I want to see what his thoughts are on what this tournament, winning it, would mean to him. 이번 대회 이제 무슨 의미세요? 왜냐면 솔직히 2013년은 2012년보다는 좀 더 못했잖아요. 그래서 만약에 결승까지 가고 우승하게 된다면 그게 무슨 의미일 것 같으세요?
일단 결승까지 가면 무조건 우승할 것 같은데 일단 우승하면 되게 다음 년 잘 될 것 같은 그런 느낌일 것 같아요.
So he says, as long as I get to the finals, I'm actually pretty confident I'll win the whole tournament. And another reason why I'm really looking forward to winning this tournament is I think if I were to win, it would be a really good kind of start for my next year. And I hope that if I were to win, the momentum would just carry over to the next year and be a kind of new start for me in the year 2014. Well, Life, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. Guys, right now, groups C and D are setting up on stage, so we're actually going to take an hour break as they do need to warm up. It is a cold venue, so they need some time to practice and warm up. So please stay tuned, though, as we'll be back in 1 hour with more games.